Wyoming Territory. Summer of 1879, the wind carried dust across the plains as Donovan Shaw rode his chestnut gelding through the edge of the Bighorn foothills, the sun low and copper in the sky. He had been on his own for years now, ever since the war took his brothers and the fever took his father. Cattle work paid enough to keep his land, and silence was easier than most company. But that afternoon, something caught his eye, a shape up ahead near a cluster of cottonwoods. Too still to be an animal. As he rode closer, his stomach turned. A girl. A young woman, tied to a tree with her wrists raw and a torn skirt brushing her ankles. Her eyes were wide, face streaked with dirt and tears. A wooden sign hung around her neck, swinging in the breeze. Unwanted. Donovan slid off his horse so fast his boot hit the ground hard. He pulled his knife from his belt and went straight to her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "I got you," he said, voice low and sure. "You're safe now." He sliced the rope clean and caught her before she fell. Her body was trembling, but she didn't fight him. Her head dropped against his chest. She was light, and he could feel her ribs even through her dress. "What's your name?" he asked. She blinked up at him, voice hoarse. "Willa Ashby." "All right, Willa," he said, lifting her into his saddle. "I'm taking you home." She didn't speak again, just clung to the saddle horn as he led the horse the rest of the way. His cabin sat in a quiet valley, a few miles from the nearest town. It was small but solid. Her fingers tightened when they reached the porch, like she expected to be turned away again. Donovan caught her hand before she could pull back. "You stay as long as you need. No one's gonna hurt you here." Inside, he helped her to the chair by the hearth and got a blanket over her shoulders. She was cold, even in the warm air. He handed her a tin cup of water, and she drank like she hadn't had anything in days. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded. He set beans and cornbread on the table, and she ate slow but steady. Her eyes never left him, like she was trying to figure if he was real. When she finished, she looked down at her hands. "They left me there yesterday," she whispered. "My uncle said I was no good. Said I didn't belong anywhere." Donovan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They were wrong." Willa looked up at him. There was something broken in her eyes, but not gone. Not completely. "I can work," she said quickly. "I can clean, cook. I am not useless." "You don't owe me anything," Donovan said. "Not a damn thing." She stared at him like she did not believe it, like she had never heard those words in her life. That night, he made her a bed on the cot near the stove. She curled up under the quilt, hands tucked beneath her chin. Donovan sat on the edge of his own bed across the room, oil lamp casting gold light on the log walls. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly in the dark. He looked over. "Because someone should have." A long silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just full. "Donovan," she said, her voice small. "Thank you." He nodded, eyes on the ceiling. "Sleep now, Willa. You're safe here." But he did not sleep much himself. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that sign hanging around her neck, and it made his jaw clench harder than it had in years. By morning, Willa had washed her face and braided her hair. She moved quiet and careful, setting water to boil and sweeping the floor without being asked. Donovan saddled up to check the fence line but paused before heading out. "You do not need to try so hard," he said, her hands stilled on the broom. "I do not want to be sent away." "You will not be," he said firmly. She nodded, but her shoulders stayed tight. The days passed. Willa started smiling again, just a little. She was good with animals, gentle and patient. She fed the chickens, helped mend the gate, and started humming sometimes when she cooked. Donovan noticed how she always made sure there was coffee ready when he returned from riding. One evening after supper, she stood on the porch with her arms folded against the breeze. He stepped out beside her. "Used to think I wanted to be invisible," she said, watching the sun dip behind the hills. "But when they tied me to that tree, I thought, maybe I do want someone to see me." "I see you," he said. She looked at him, eyes soft. "I see you too." He had not meant to reach for her hand, but he did, and she let him. That night, she did not ask to sleep in the cot. She just walked over to him and whispered, "I do not want to be alone." He took her hand and led her to his bed, slow and careful. She curled against him like she belonged there, like they had not just met days ago but had been searching for each other all their lives. "You are not unwanted," he said into her hair. She did not answer, but her arms came around him, holding tight. In the days that followed, Willa's laugh came easier. She started planting herbs in the side yard, and Donovan built her a bench beneath the aspen trees. He watched her as she worked, sunlight catching in her hair, and something in his chest started to soften. One morning, she handed him a clean shirt, freshly mended, and said, "I never thought I would feel safe again." He brushed her cheek with his thumb. "You are safe, and you're not going anywhere unless you want to." She leaned into his touch, eyes shining. "I do not want to go. I want to be here, with you." He kissed her then. Her lips were warm, her hands sliding up his arms. It was not rushed, not desperate. It was slow and certain and real. And for the first time in a long, long while, Donovan Shaw felt like he had come home too. The creek behind Donovan's cabin ran clear and cold through the cottonwoods, and by late June the water had dropped enough for Willa to wade across barefoot, the hem of her skirt bunched in one hand. She moved slowly, favoring the ankle that had twisted days ago while stepping over a loose stone near the chicken run. Donovan had wrapped it tight and warned her to rest, but she'd always carried more stubbornness than sense when it came to stillness. From where he split cedar along the fence line, Donovan watched her pick her way over the smooth rocks. She knelt near the far bank and dipped a tin pail into the water, her braid falling forward over one shoulder. A robin called from the cottonwood above her, and she paused, head tilted, listening like even the birds had something worth hearing. He set the axe down and crossed the yard to meet her on her return. She didn't speak until the pail was settled beside the washbasin. "There's wild mint by the water," she said. "If I dry some, we could keep it through winter." "You thinking that far ahead already?" "I'm not leaving before frost, if that's what you're asking." He reached for the basin, poured some water over his hands, and dried them on his trousers. "I wasn't asking," he said. She glanced up at him, and for once, didn't look away too quick. "You don't say much unless it matters, do you?" "No one ever listened much, even when I did." "I would," she said, quiet but sure. He studied her face, the way the wind tugged at the loose strands around her temples. "You always been like this?" "Like what?" "Looking folks straight in the eye like you want the truth whether it hurts or not." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Didn't used to, but pretending never kept me safe." He didn't push, just nodded once and turned toward the root cellar. She followed, limping slightly. Inside the cool, dim space, she reached for the shelf where she'd already stacked jars of pickled beans and rhubarb preserves. He watched her fingers trace the edge of the wood. "I used to think about running," she said, "when I was still at my uncle's. I'd look out across the pasture and think, if I keep walking, maybe I'll stop feeling like I'm made of glass." "You're not," he said. "You're made of something harder." She gave a small shake of her head. "I broke easy enough." Donovan reached past her for a sack of potatoes, brushing her shoulder. "Broken things can be fixed. Doesn't mean they weren't strong to begin with." They stood there a moment, the dust swirling in the shaft of light from above. Willa turned to face him fully, her voice steadier now. "You ever want something different than this?" she asked. "The quiet, the land, all this space." "I used to think I did," he said. "After my brothers died, I wanted to leave it all behind. But the land's the only thing that stayed." She nodded, thoughtful. "I never had anything that stayed." "You do now." She didn't answer, just stepped closer and rested her forehead lightly against his chest. He wrapped an arm around her, slow and deliberate, like he was still learning the shape of her presence. Later, as dusk settled in, Willa sat on the porch mending one of Donovan's shirts where the elbow had worn through. She worked by lamplight, her fingers steady with the needle. Donovan came up the steps with a tin of fresh tobacco and settled on the bench beside her. "Neighbor came by," he said. "Turner, from the South Ridge. Said his youngest girl's been asking after a school teacher again." Willa tied off her thread and folded the fabric. "There's no one for miles that can read past the Bible. You could." She blinked at that. "I haven't taught anyone since I was 16. But you could," he repeated. She looked out across the darkening yard. "Maybe, if someone needed it bad enough." Donovan leaned back, boots crossed at the ankle. "You got a way of making things grow, Willa. Doesn't matter if it's herbs or hope." She laughed then, low and real. "That's the kindest lie I've ever heard." "Ain't lying." She turned toward him fully. "You really think I could be useful to someone else again?" "You already are." The quiet settled back in like a blanket. She didn't say anything more, just leaned her head against his shoulder and let the stars come out in their own time. Donovan kept his gaze on the horizon, the shape of his world shifting slowly, quietly, into something he hadn't known he needed until she arrived. The first storm of July rolled in low and wide across the plains, slow moving and thick with heat. By the time the wind changed, Donovan had already brought the horses into the lean-to and latched the shutters. Willa stood at the window with her arms crossed tight over her chest, watching the sky bruise to a deep green-gray. Lightning cracked far off, followed by the low, steady rumble that made her flinch. Donovan crossed the room without a word and lit the lantern, trimming the wick until the glow was soft and steady. "Storms bother you?" he asked. Willa didn't look away from the window. "Not the sky," she said. "It's the waiting, that part before anything actually happens." He stood beside her, close but not crowding her, and they watched the clouds press down on the land like a weight. "You ever been caught out in one?" she asked. "Once, near the Powder River. Horse spooked, threw me into a dry wash. Spent the night under a ledge with nothing but my coat." "Were you afraid?" "I was tired," he said. "Too tired to be scared." She turned toward him, her voice quieter now. "I used to think if I stayed quiet enough, trouble might pass me by, but it always found its way in." He met her eyes, the lantern light catching the flecks of amber in her gaze. "You don't have to hide from it here." "I know," she said, and her voice caught on the edge of something too full to name. They ate supper as the rain began to fall, slow at first, then drumming sharp and fast against the roof. Willa set the tin plates aside and reached for the small pile of cloth she'd been stitching into a curtain. Her hands moved with practiced ease, but her eyes stayed on the fire. "Did you always know how to make a place feel like home?" she asked. Donovan shook his head. "Never thought of it that way." "Well, you did," she said. "Even before I believed I'd stay." He watched the firelight flicker across her cheek. "What changed your mind?" "You," she said without hesitation. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked to the cupboard, pulled down a wooden box from the top shelf, and set it on the table in front of her. "Go on," he said when she hesitated. Inside were letters, folded and bundled with twine. A pocket knife with initials carved into the handle. Pressed flour yellowed with age. She looked up at him. My mother's, he said. And my brother's. I kept them because I didn't know what else to do. Willa touched the knife gently. You kept them close. I tried to forget for a long time. Thought if I buried it deep enough, it couldn't hurt. She reached across the table and laid her hand over his. I think forgetting is worse. His fingers turned under hers, rough palm meeting soft skin. You remember everything, don't you? Every name, she said. Every time someone called me no one. You're not no one. I know that now. The storm passed before midnight. The windows fogged from the heat inside and the cool air outside. Willa stood barefoot on the porch, damp boards under her toes. Donovan leaned against the post beside her, arms loosely folded. Do you believe things happen for a reason? She asked. I believe we make reasons out of what happens, he said. She nodded slowly. I think I was meant to find this place. To find you. He didn't speak, just reached out and ran his knuckles along her jaw. She leaned into the touch, eyes closed. I never had a man show me kindness without asking something in return, she said. I'm not asking for anything, he said. She opened her eyes. You already gave me more than I thought I'd ever have. He stepped closer, his voice low. You're not leaving, are you? No, she said. Not ever. His kiss was quiet, steady, like every promise he'd made without saying the words. She answered with a hand at the back of his neck, pulling him closer, grounding herself in the weight of him, the steadiness. They stood like that long after the rain stopped, the night around them full but peaceful, the world finally quiet enough to hear the truth of things. Inside, she folded one of his shirts beside her own in the chest at the foot of the bed. He watched her from the doorway, and when she turned, she smiled, not shy, not unsure, but certain. We'll need more shelves, she said. If I'm going to keep my things here. He nodded. I'll build them. And he would, because she wasn't passing through, because she was already home. By mid-July, the sun lingered late in the sky, casting long shadows over the far ridge where the grass turned gold against the fading light. Willa stood barefoot by the barn. A coil of twine looped over one arm and a bundle of drying flax tucked beneath the other. She'd started weaving again, small things first, like mats and cordage, but her hands had memory, and the rhythm of it soothed her in ways she hadn't expected. Donovan finished oiling the hinges on the upper gate, wiped his palms on his trousers, then leaned against the fence to watch her work. She didn't look up, but her voice carried soft across the stillness. I used to help my mother twist rope when I was little. She said good hands could feel the strength in a thing before it showed. Donovan ran a finger along the grain of the fence rail, his gaze steady on her. Your mother teach you much else? She tried, but I wasn't old enough to remember it all. She died before I reached 12. Willa wound one end of the flax around the post and gave it a tug. I kept thinking if I just remembered harder, maybe I'd see her face better, but it always fades. He stepped closer, careful not to cast his shadow over her. You remember what she called you? She nodded once. Little bird. Said I had wings, even if I didn't know how to use them. Donovan crouched to gather the loose flax ends she'd dropped, handed them over without a word. She took them slowly, eyes lingering on his hands. Never thought I'd find someone who'd want to know those kinds of things, she said. Most folks only want what they can see. I don't care much for shallow looking. He meant it plain, and she heard it that way, because her shoulders eased and something unguarded passed across her face. Later, they worked side by side in the garden, pulling up the last of the radishes before the heat turned them sharp. Willa dug carefully, fingers coaxing the roots free, while Donovan carried the filled basket to the porch. I was thinking, she said, brushing soil from her skirt. We could trade some of this for salt or sugar. Turner's wife said they've got molasses put up. Wouldn't mind molasses, he said. And we've got more than we need. She looked up at him, the sun catching the curve of her brow. Feels good to be able to give something back. You've already given plenty. No, she said. I haven't. Not yet. That evening, she brought out a narrow bundle wrapped in linen and laid it across the table. I've been working on this, she said, unwrapping it slowly. Inside was a length of homespun cloth, hand-stitched with a pattern of mountain laurels and wheat stalks along the edge. The thread was uneven in places, but the care in it was clear. I thought maybe you could use it for your saddlebag, she said. Or your rifle wrap. Donovan ran one hand gently over the cloth, then looked at her. You made this for me? I wanted to give you something that lasts. He folded it carefully, set it aside, then reached for her hand not suddenly, but with a quiet certainty that didn't need asking. Willa, he said, his voice low. I didn't think I'd ever have someone again, not after all the years gone. She didn't pull away. You do now. That night, they lay together not out of need, but out of something deeper, something that had taken root slowly and without force. Willa pressed her cheek against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of him. I used to think I'd never be seen, she said into the darkness. Not really. You were just waitin' on the right eyes, he told her. In the morning, she rose first, wrapped herself in her shawl, and stepped out to feed the hens. Donovan followed a moment later, boots half-laced, hair still damp from washing. She turned to him with a quiet smile. We'll need more seed come fall. I'll ride to town next week. Will you bring back a bit of ribbon? She added, almost shyly. Just something small. I'd like to tie my hair up proper. He paused, then nodded. Any color? You pick, she said. He stepped close then, kissed her temple and said, All right, Willa, I'll find just the one. And when she nodded, it wasn't faint or uncertain, it was the kind of nod people give when they know they're home. August brought a drier heat, the kind that settled in the bones and made the air shimmer out past the barn. Willa stood in the shade of the cottonwoods with a length of muslin stretched between stakes, brushing the fabric with a slurry of crushed walnut hulls and ash. The dye darkened slowly beneath her hands, and she worked with care, shaping color with purpose. Donovan approached quiet, boots brushing the dry grass. He carried a wrapped parcel tucked under one arm. They had ribbon, he said, offering it out. Willa set her brush aside and wiped her palms on her apron before unwrapping the cloth. Inside lay a length of deep green silk, threaded with gold trim at the edge. She touched it like something delicate. This is finer than I expected, she said. Storekeep said it came from New York, Donovan replied. Figured you ought to have something rare. She didn't speak right away, only turned and reached back to gather her hair. He stepped forward without being asked, tied the ribbon for her with a slow, measured knot. Fits you, he said. I never thought I'd wear anything from that far away, she said, voice low. Seems to me, he said, distance don't matter much once something finds its place. That night, they sat at the edge of the pasture, a quilt spread beneath them, the grass around them tall and rustling. Willa leaned on one arm, her other hand trailing through clover blossoms. Turner's wife asked if I'd meet with the children come September, she said. Said they've got slates in the shed, and even a few books left from the old circuit teacher. You want to? I think I do, she said. But only if it doesn't change things here. Donovan looked out over the fading light. What we've got isn't fragile, Willa. I know. She hesitated, then met his eyes. I want to make sure I'm still yours, even if I'm there's a little too. You are, he said. You always will be. In late August, They rode north to the edge of the river where the cottonwoods grew thick and the banks rose steep with clay. Donovan brought the shovel and the saw, and Willa carried the oilskin pouch with her mother's brooch inside. They chose a spot beneath a young elm, where the roots had not yet spread too deep. "I want to leave something here," she said. "Something from before, so it doesn't weigh me down." He knelt beside her as she dug into the earth. When the pouch was buried, she pressed her palm flat over the soil. "I loved her," she said, "but I need to make room for what's next." They rode home slow, the sun at their backs. That evening, Donovan placed a small carven box on the table. Inside was a ring, silver and simple, with a single etched line around the band like a narrow path through snow. "I had it made when I was young," he said, "for a future I didn't think I'd ever reach." Willa looked from the ring to him. "You sure?" "I wake up every morning and know I am," he said. She took the box in both hands. "Then yes," she said. "Yes to everything." They married beneath the cottonwoods, just the two of them, with Turner and his wife standing witness. Willa wore her green ribbon, and Donovan had washed the dust from his collar and shaved close. After the vows were spoken, she looked at him with something bright and steady in her eyes. "I used to think I came to you empty," she said. "But I didn't. I had something left. I had hope." "You gave it to me too," he said. They built a second room onto the cabin that fall, not out of need but out of intention. Willa taught in the mornings, walking the ridge path to the wood-frame schoolhouse where 6 children waited with slates and sharpened chalk. In the afternoons, she returned home with dust on her hem and stories to share while Donovan worked the fence lines or brought in wood for winter. Some evenings, they read together by lamplight, a borrowed book open between them. Others, they sat in silence, the kind that felt full rather than hollow. One night in late November, as the first snow tapped gently at the window panes, Willa rested her head on Donovan's chest and listened to the low hum of his breathing. "You think we'll always have this?" she asked. "I don't see why not," he answered. "I never thought peace would feel so solid." He kissed her hair. "It's not fragile, Willa. It's built same as everything else we've made. With our hands. With time." She closed her eyes and let herself believe it fully. Years passed and nothing rushed. They grew into their land, into each other, into a life made not of grand things but steady ones. A warm stove, a trusted voice, a shared glance across a quiet room. They grew old without noticing, because love, when it settles deep, does not call attention to its passing. It simply remains. And in the end, they had all they needed because what they built together.